미디어 프로젝트 8주 3차 시강의를 시작하겠습니다. 챕터 6은 기하급수 기업 세우기입니다. 지난 시간에 이어서 비즈니스 모델 캔버스를 만드는 방법에 대해서 강의하도록 하겠습니다. 관련 동영상을 보시겠습니다.
And a business model is how a company creates value for itself while delivering products or services for its customers. Now, if you think about it, in the old days, we'd think about how to organize a company around functional organizations. We think, no, a company is about its sales department or its engineering department, and you would draw an org chart. But now we're going to draw a very different diagram. We're going to draw a diagram of how to think about all the pieces of a business. And so let's take a look at these 9 boxes. 9 boxes to describe any company from the world's largest to a 2-person startup starting in your parents' garage. Let's take a look at the first piece called the value proposition. The value proposition answers the question, what are you building and for who? The value proposition says, hey, it's not about your idea or product, it's about solving a problem or a need for a customer. That is, what pain are you solving, what gain are you creating, and more importantly, who are your customers? Now, value proposition is a fancy word for what product or service are you building. This is where you normally would list all your features and here's all the speeds and feeds and benefits and whatever, but you're really going to be asking a different question than might have been used to. It's not all about your technology. Your technology is just part of the value proposition. Customers really don't care about your technology. The customers are trying to solve a problem or fulfill a need. By the way, we'll be talking about this through multiple lectures. The difference between a problem and a need is, a problem is, I have an accounting problem, or I want to use a word processor. And those types of products solve problems. But there are other things that human beings do, like I want to be entertained, or I want to have a date. Those are some basic hardwired social needs. Or I want to communicate with my friends, like Facebook or Twitter. Those are needs. Needs are different than problems. And by the way, if you could find products that solve needs, your total available market, as you'll see later, is huge compared to I solve specific problems. So the next thing is, who are my customers? Who are they and why would they buy? And as you'll hear a number of times, your customers do not exist to buy, you exist for them. And what you're going to do by getting out of the building is figuring out all their geographic, social characteristics, demographics, such that you actually could draw and put up a picture on your wall of who the archetype is or who the persona is of your customer. And it turns out that in most startups, you might have more than 1 or 2 or 3 types of customer archetypes and personas, but you need to understand them in detail. And there is no possible way you could have anything but a hypothesis on day 1 of who they are. The next is channels. How does your product over here get to your customers over here? And we use distribution channels to do that. Now, what's really interesting is pre-1990s, the only channels to get to a customer was a physical channel. That is, you went to a store, you had salespeople, there was physical distribution. But since the mid-1990s, in the last couple of decades, we now have virtual channels, the web, mobile, cloud. And so distribution channels, the first question you want to ask is, how will I be selling and how will I be distributing my products? Are they through physical channels or are they web mobile? Or given today, almost every physical channel also has a web presence. What is the relationship of how your product gets from your company to the customers? Customer relationships is kind of the fourth piece. And customer relationships has a really interesting interaction with these other 3 pieces. It basically says, how do I get customers, how do I keep them, and how do I grow them? And just like thinking about distribution channels, these are very different for web mobile than they are for physical channels. But visually, they kind of look like this double-sided funnel. So let's just take a look at quickly a web example. In getting customers, you're going to be worrying about how do I acquire them? That is, how do I get them even to my website? How do I activate them? That is, how do I make them do something? And then later on, we'll see after I got them, how do I keep them around? That is, how do I not lose them through attrition and churn? And then what can I do once I have customers to make them spend more money or use my product even more? And so one of the things we'll be thinking about is how do I get, keep, and grow customers? And just like every other step, you might have hypotheses on day one, but you're only going to figure this out when you're out of the building. The next thing is revenue streams. How do you actually make money from your product and service being sold to customer segments? Revenue streams basically ask the question, what value is the customer paying for? And it actually has you think about what's the strategy of how I'm going to capture that value. Is it I'm going to just have a direct sale and it's a transaction based on price? Is it a freemium model where I'm going to give away the product for free and hope that some portion convert later? Is it a license or subscription model? That revenue model is different than the pricing tactics. That is, what is the dollar or pound amount or euro amount that I'm going to be charging? Again, the only way to figure this out is being able to interact with tens or hundreds or thousands of customers till you finally understand what the right revenue stream and revenue model is. The next piece you want to think about is what are the key resources? What do you need to make the business model work? What assets are important? And what's an example of an asset in a key resource? Well, finance. Do you need capital? Do you need a line of credit? Some assets and resources are physical. Do you need physical plant, like a manufacturing line? Do you need specialized machines? Do you need vans and for delivery? Do you need cars? Is there something else you need? Is there intellectual property you need? Is there patents you need to acquire or protect? Do you need to acquire customer lists? Or is it just that you need to get great people, great software programmers in a specific area, or great hardware designers, or great manufacturing people? And then finally, again, the interaction between intellectual and human capital that's another key resource. What specifically do you need to do to keep these people, and who are they? The next piece is, who are your key partners and suppliers? And partnerships are kind of interesting, is we need to ask ourselves, before what's the deal, is what exactly are we acquiring from partners? And also, what activities are they going to perform and when? And this is where startups sometimes make a mistake of thinking, well, large companies do partnerships, I guess I need those too on day one. Turns out the types of partnerships you need in year one are certainly not the ones you're going to need in year 3 or 5 or 10. And the types of partnerships could be strategic alliances, joint ventures, just regular suppliers and buyers. And so you need to be thinking through who they are and actually getting out of the building and testing them. Next are key activities. What's the most important things you need to do for the business to make the business model work? Are you in the production business? Are you making something? Or are you in the problem-solving business, like you're doing consulting or engineering? Or are you managing supply chains? What are the key activities you need to become expert at? And then finally, all this adds up on the left-hand side, over here, to costs. What are the costs and expenses to operate the business model? One of the interesting things about cost is it's not just the obvious ones, like people or buildings or materials. What you're really going to be asking are, what are the entire costs to operate our business model? And so you want to think about what are the most important costs you need to worry about? What are the most expensive resources you're going to need to pay for? And what key activities are the most expensive? And then you want to ask the typical accounting things, what are fixed costs? What are variable costs? Are there economies of scale? And you want to start getting a good handle on what it is that will end up costing you money to run your business.
여섯 번째는 비즈니스 모델을 찾는 것입니다. 10배의 개선을 이루려면 완전히 새로운 비즈니스 모델이 필요할 가능성이 높습니다. 혁신 기업의 딜레마에서 크리스텐슨이 보여준 것처럼 파괴적 혁신을 달성하는 스타트업은 떠오르는 기술을 이용해서 미래의 고객 니즈나 충족되지 않은 고객 니즈 또는 틈새 시장의 니즈를 충족시키는 덜 비싼 제품을 내놓습니다. 크리스텐슨은 중요한 것은 파괴적 혁신 제품이 아니라 기존 비즈니스 모델을 위협하는 새로운 비즈니스 모델이라고 강조합니다. 예를 들면 사우스웨스트 항공사는 비행기를 마치 버스처럼 취급해서 완전히 새로운 틈새 시장을 일궜습니다. 구글은 웹페이지가 생기기 전에는 존재하지 않았던 애드워즈 비즈니스 모델을 만들었습니다. 미래에는 블록체인 같은 기술을 통해서 새로운 금융 비즈니스 모델이 만들어질 것입니다. 크리스 앤더슨은 프리라는 그의 책에서 파괴적 혁신 제품의 비용이 낮아진다는 점을 설명했습니다. 머지않아 정보 기반의 비즈니스 모델은 물론이고 모든 비즈니스 모델이 소비자에게 공짜로 제공될 것이라고 말했습니다. 인기를 끌고 있는 프리미엄 모델이 그런 사례입니다. 많은 웹사이트들이 기본 서비스는 무료로 제공하면서 이용자가 비용을 대면 업그레이드나 스토리지 확장, 추가 기능 이용 등을 할 수 있게 해줍니다. 광고, 교차 보조, 회원가입 등의 비즈니스 모델 역시 기본적으로 공짜인 정보 위에 수익을 내는 영업을 추가하는 방식입니다. 켈리는 그러한 아이디어를 더욱 확장시키고 있습니다. 디지털 네트워크에서는 무엇이든 복제할 수 있고 그래서 풍요롭습니다. 케빈 켈리는 기저에 놓인 정보가 공짜일 때 비즈니스 모델을 만드는 방법에는 다음과 같이 8가지가 있다고 말하고 있습니다. 첫 번째는 즉시성입니다. 사람들이 아마존에서 사전에 주문을 하고 영화 개봉일에 극장을 찾는 것은 즉시성 때문입니다. 무언가를 가장 먼저 알거나 가장 먼저 경험한 사람이 되는 것은 문화적, 사회적, 심지어 상업적인 가치를 지닙니다. 두 번째는 맞춤화입니다. 나만을 위해 맞춤화된 제품이나 서비스를 갖는 것은 경험의 질이나 사용 편의성, 기능성 측면에서 추가적인 가치를 만들어줄 뿐 아니라 끈끈함을 만들어냅니다. 맞춤화하는 과정에서 쌍방이 무언가를 투자합니다. 세 번째는 설명입니다. 제품이나 서비스가 공짜는 아니래도 그것을 사용하기 위해 혹은 더 잘 사용하기 위해 필요한 내용을 더 빨리 배우게 해주는 서비스가 있다면 추가적 가치가 있습니다. 켈리는 농담으로 이렇게 말합니다. 소프트웨어 가격은 공짜로 주고 매뉴얼은 1만 달러를 받습니다. 네 번째는 권위입니다. 해당 제품이나 서비스가 진짜이고 안전하다는 보장이 추가적 가치가 생깁니다. 버그가 없고 신뢰할 수 있으며 보증서가 있는 제품과 서비스는 추가적 가치가 있습니다. 다섯 번째는 접근성입니다. 소유하게 되면 관리 및 유지를 해야 됩니다. 수백 개 앱과 여러 개 플랫폼을 가진 지금 같은 시대에 정리하게 도와주고 원하는 것을 빨리 찾게 해주는 서비스가 높은 가치가 있습니다. 여섯 번째는 구현입니다. 디지털 정보는 실체나 물리적 형체가 없습니다. 공짜 소프트웨어가 만약 우리가 좋아하는 물리적 포맷으로 제공된다면 사람들은 기꺼이 더 많은 돈을 냅니다. 일곱 번째는 후원입니다. 관객은 창작자에게 대가를 주고 싶어 합니다. 팬은 아티스트, 뮤지션, 작가에게 감사의 뜻으로 보상을 하고 싶어 합니다. 그런 식으로 그들과 관계를 맺고 싶기 때문입니다. 그러나 지불 방법이 아주 쉽고 금액이 적절하며 그 돈이 창작자에게 직접 도움이 된다고 확신할 때에만 대가를 낼 것입니다. 8번째는 검색성입니다. 잠재 관객이 찾아낼 수 없다면 창작품은 아무런 가치가 없습니다. 이런 검색성은 콘텐츠를 모아서 보여주는 사이트 수준에서 가능하고 개별 창작자는 인터넷 소음 속에 파묻혀버리기 십상입니다. 따라서 잠재적 이용자가 창작자를 쉽게 찾을 수 있는 앱스토어, 소셜미디어, 디지털 플랫폼이 있다면 창작자들에게 큰 도움이 될 것입니다. 이제 비즈니스 모델 캔버스로 돌아가서 특성 중 하나인 파트너 관계를 살펴보겠습니다. 많은 기존 업체들은 현재 하나의 스타트업이 아니라 여러 다른 스타트업에 의해서 파괴적 혁신을 겪고 있습니다. 하나의 업종에 속한 하나의 개별 서비스를 온갖 스타트업이 공격한다는 이야기입니다. 비즈니스 모델 측면에서 일어난 이 같은 중요한 파괴적 혁신을 언번들링이라고 혹은 리번들링이라고 합니다. 이러한 새로운 비즈니스 모델은 잠재적으로 새로운 가치 요인들을 갖고 있습니다. 그 요인은 매출을 창출하고 경쟁자로부터 차별화하고 기하급수 기업들과 발을 맞춰서 개별 제어나 서비스가 아니라 기존 기업들을 완전히 파괴할 수 있는 장기 전략을 세우게 해줍니다. 말하자면 강력한 이중 파괴 시나리오입니다. 어펜딕스입니다. 지금까지 시청하신 것으로 이번 차수의 수업이 인정됩니다. 테슬라의 비즈니스 모델을 보도록 하시겠습니다.
Whether you like Tesla or not, you can't disagree with the fact that it's changing the automobile industry dramatically. Before Tesla, people would associate electric cars with toy cars or golf carts, but not real cars. Well, that's over now, thanks to Elon Musk's strategy and Tesla's execution. Mostly everyone heard about Tesla. The awareness around the world is very high, and every manufacturer is now serious about producing electric vehicles. So what makes Tesla so different from other more traditional car makers like Ford, BMW or Toyota? In this video, I'll only focus on Tesla's car business and everything related to it, but not on their battery and solar roof business. Well, first of all, the value propositions are obvious. You can pretty much list here everything what makes Tesla cars amazing. So, these are premium electric cars. You can even call them luxury, although this is not the term that fits best, and I'll explain later why. So these are high-quality, environment-friendly cars. And as of today, as I'm recording this video, there is still no equivalent to that value proposition from any other traditional manufacturer. The design of the cars is outstanding, which was and still is a big problem of other manufacturers who produce ugly electric cars. Sorry BMW, even though the i3 is not that ugly, it's still nothing comparable to the beauty of the Model S or the Model 3. The range of Tesla's electric batteries is also impressive compared to most other electric cars, and this is obviously a key point. Then, of course, there's the autopilot feature, the incredibly fast acceleration, and the supercharger network, which is extremely important. You can cross the United States or Europe while never worrying about your battery range. So the technology behind a Tesla is innovative when it comes to the car industry. Some people which are more conservative still think that a real car has to use fossil fuels, that it has to burn them inside, that there must be liquids flowing everywhere, the engine must roar, smell and shake. Personally, I think that's equivalent to saying that real trains are steam locomotives. Yeah, screw you, Fuxing, and your smooth and slick 350 kilometers per hour. Anyways, Tesla represents the new automobile technology and makes internal combustion engines look old-fashioned. And that brings me to the new type of customers that Tesla created. So Tesla's customers are both status-oriented and environment-friendly people. And what also differentiates them from traditional luxury car customers is that Tesla's customers are younger on average. Of course, they are mainly rich, earning more than $100,000 per year. But that's probably going to change once Tesla will release the Model 3 on a grand scale and allow more middle-class people to purchase it. That was Elon Musk's plan since the beginning. Start with selling expensive cars to attract rich customers and use that money to create affordable mass-market electric cars. Now let's talk about the channels, and this is extremely important. So, traditional manufacturers mainly sell their cars through third-party dealers who take their commissions, but Tesla is categorically refusing to do so. Tesla showcases and sells their cars only in their own stores. It allows for two things. First of all, Tesla completely controls its brand image because you can't fully trust the middleman. And second, Tesla established its showrooms in surprising locations in order to raise awareness about itself and how it works. So, for example, you can often find a Tesla store in big shopping malls, where you absolutely never expect to find a car store. So you're curious, you go visit, you talk about Tesla with the vendors, and you learn a lot about it. This is an extremely important part of Tesla's strategy, as they talk to hundreds of thousands of people per year. Even if these people are not ready to buy a Tesla just yet, the goal is to raise their awareness so that maybe they will buy one in the next 10 years when they can afford to do so. That's also why it's very easy to get a Tesla test drive. You don't need to justify anything. You can just ask for it and they will do it with pleasure.
Ready?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The more people convinced by Tesla, the better. And of course, the other critical part of Tesla business model success lies in its internal operations side, mainly the key activities. For example, in order to reduce battery costs, Tesla is building giant battery factories, which allow for economies of scale. Also, they are streamlining as much of the production as possible. The basis of all their cars is almost the same as demonstrated by this so-called skateboard chassis, which you can see in their stores. Just like the interior, which is very simplistic and relies on the main central hub, which is this touchscreen. Streamlining most of the processes allows Tesla to reduce costs and increase production capacity, which is actually their biggest concern. So they don't have sales problems, they have delivery problems. They are just not able to produce enough cars on time, and that's a big issue that they constantly strive to solve. Also, that's related to why I previously said that Tesla weren't really typical luxury cars. Since they reduce costs a lot, there are still too many quality problems by luxury standards, which have mainly to do with design and materials used in the interior. Many luxury people expect the interior to have the best materials, although in Tesla they are very simplistic, too simplistic for some. So then, just to complete, their costs are obviously extremely complex and have everything to do with car manufacturing, right? So I'll not list them here. There are just way too many things. The revenue streams are, well, car sales. And personally, I think that one day they will allow other electric vehicles to charge at their supercharging stations and earn money this way, just like gas stations do. So that's infrastructure, real estate, and it's another branch of their business, but which was critical to kick off their car sales so customers wouldn't worry about charging or slow charging. And of course, as I said in the beginning, I'm not counting here their battery business and their solar roof business. So, generally speaking, Tesla is an extremely innovative company in many ways, and they must be. They are a new car company that's growing fast and creating a new market, so they must innovate in order to sell more and reduce their costs. Now, the question is, will Tesla survive once the other car manufacturers decide to produce more and more of their own electric cars? Because make no mistake, it's not actually that complicated for Mercedes or BMW to start mass producing their own electric cars. They just don't focus too much on it yet because the traditional car market, non-electric, is so huge that electric car sales represent only a tiny fraction of it. Once this market will grow enough for them, thanks to Tesla mainly, then they will start to compete seriously. Most of them are aiming at serious electric vehicle production around 2020. And then the question will be back to the quality of the product and, most of all, the brand. Which one do you prefer and which one will you support? You probably guessed mine. I'll stick with Tesla. Let's not forget who brought this innovation to the world in the first place, who launched the trend, who started the eco-friendly car revolution. That's Tesla. The others will merely follow this trend once it's established and profitable for them. But they didn't care about taking any such risks and making our world cleaner before that. Sorry, but I couldn't resist squeezing my personal opinion. If you want to know more about the innovation strategies of many different companies, make sure to check out my Udemy course about innovation, titled Business Model Innovation: Differentiate and Grow Your Company.